Look at that.
Wow.
Wow. That's
Steve, you want to make me
beautiful.
co-host?
Oh, yes. Hang on, let me find you.
Gee.
Yeah, every time you keep jumping, come on. Let me do,
That's more like a painting.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
because the,
Yeah.
okay. There we go. Don't move, don't move. There we go. Got it. Okay, sorry about
This-
that.
This
Okay.
is probably the most iconic, most photographed peak that there is in Zion. This
Wow.
is the Watchman Peak. Why did that go away? Okay, this is the Watchman Peak and this is the Virgin River.
Mm.
Yeah, come on now. There we go. Everybody see the entrance to the park?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, this is the southern entrance. There's obviously one on the eastern side. This is the closest one. The canyon itself, or the main opening area of the canyon, starts here. And then as we will see as we get further up, it narrows down to as little as 19 feet if you want to go that far up the river. Just a few facts about Zion. It's about 235,000 square miles. As far as the 63 actual national parks, and I excluded out the national monuments and the seashores, just the national parks. It's about in the middle at number 36. But as far as the mighty five of Utah's national parks, it's the smallest. The first human visitors arrived between 7,000 and 8,000 years ago. The first group of humans were part of the Pueblo people. And then over time, after about halfway through till now, it became part of the Paiute Empire. The first Europeans, which were mostly the part of the Mormon migration, was in the middle of the 1800s, about 1847. There's approximately 200 miles of trails. There are 37 backpack or wilderness campsites. It was originally a national monument in 1909. Makuta Weep was the name of it. And the Paiute, or the Pueblo name for that was Straight Canyon. It became a national park in 1919, where it was named to Zion, and in the Hebrew language, that means sanctuary. Kolob Canyon, which was at that time a separate part of the area, was added to Zion in 1956. 85% of it was designated a wilderness area in 2009. There's three main areas. You've got Kolob Canyon, which was added in 2009. There's the West Temple area and the main canyon, the Canyon Scenic Drive, and its related high country. The elevation in the canyon goes from about 3,600 feet, and the towering walls of the canyon go up to about 8,800 feet. The narrowest width, when you're actually up in the narrows in the area of is about 19 feet wide. Shuttle service, which I will talk about a little later. The shuttle service is your friend. It began in 1990, and it's now required from March 1st through the end of November that the shuttle is the only way up the Zion Canyon Scenic Drive. You have to take the shuttle, park your car back at the visitor center and get on the shuttle. Now, something which is changing very rapidly, not only for Zion, but also other national parks, is that we're getting more and more reservations are required for either entering parks themselves or some of the more popular trails. And Zion put their first reservation in for the trails, which is Angel's Landing. That is the #1 most popular trail in the park. The Narrows Trail being the second one. This is kind of a list of the number of visitors in Zion going back to 1991. Our COVID years, where we were always restricted on where we could go, was 20 and 21. But let's say we picked the year 2000, and if we come over here at the end of the year, it was about 2,004,000 people, 400,000 people. If we go 10 years later to 2010, it was only 2,650,000 people. Now, if we take the next 10 years after that, 2011 up to, I'm going to stop at 2019 because again, 20 was a COVID year. We almost double in the next 10 years. That's about 4.5 million. In 21, which when we kind of opened up a little bit after Zion, it did top 5 million people. Typically out of the national parks, Zion is kind of coming in between #3 and #4.
Wow.
As you can see, coming across, January and February are the least number of people in the park. And over here, November and December are the next most crowded. And you can see in the March through October, it gets up into 500,000 or over 500,000 people there every month. Important web addresses. You can take a
What's your
screenshot
favorite
of this. But the most important one up here is this recreation.gov. This is a website set up by the government, and this is where reservations are made for any of the national parks, any of the national seashores, any of the national monuments. Anything you want to know, you go there and you start there. As far as specific information on Zion, nationalparkservice.gov/Zion will tell you what they have on it, and then you've got planning your visits. These two in green are an individual called Joe's Guide to National Park, and he will tell you everything there is about the trails, about the hiking areas, where to go. He shows photographs of every trail. It's a really, really good way to do your research on going to Zion. Here's Zion, Utah's Mighty Five. You've got Zion down here in the southeastern corner. About 2-hour drive away is Bryce. And you got about 2 hours from that is Capitol Reef. And you go a little further in time, probably 4 hours to Arches and Canyonlands. They do a very extensive advertising for people to come visit these parks, which I think is a good contributor as to why the parks have increased in the number of visitors every year. I put a little line under Bluff, our buddy Paul Martini. That's where he's from. He's the one that uses Joyce Martini's web address, I guess, for when he does his postings on our board.
Well,
Very
he's
excellent.
actually from Orange.
Huh?
He lives there, but he's from Orange.
Oh, okay.
He's a local boy.
He's a local boy.
Can you point that out where they are one more time?
Right down at the
Oh,
bottom.
Bluff, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's almost at the same lower right-hand corner as Zion is in the lower left-hand corner.
Mhm. Thank
How
you.
do we get there? Well, we leave our areas down here in the Long Beach area. We hop on the 10 freeway, get up on the 15 freeway, and head north. 15 will take you all the way up to Salt Lake City if you want. When you cross into Nevada, you're about halfway there. Go through Vegas. Join up here at Arizona. This is the Virgin River Gorge. And to me, this is some of the most beautiful area. It's very short. It's only about 15 miles. But it's to me, it's like driving through the bottom of the Grand Canyon with all its side canyons. It's just gorgeous. Then you pop up into Utah. From St. George over to the Zion, it's about 30 miles. So you've got between a 6 and a 7 hour drive to get there, depending upon how many stops you make. 440 miles, and then you do put 1 more hour in due to a time zone change.
Mm.
Doug, can you, is the road to the Virgin River Gorge paved?
Yeah, it's literally I-15 right through the gorge.
Oh, I see. It looks like it's a little distance from the.
No, it's literally I-15. This is the
Okay.
Arizona section right here.
Yeah,
So you actually go in just out of Mesquite into Arizona, then you pop out of Arizona. And when you get to the top, what you're doing is you're actually climbing from the desert up into the taller areas. You're gaining about 2,000, 3,000 foot there,
Mhm.
up through that gorge. Just
I
beautiful.
call that the hole in the wall.
Ah, okay. As far as the national park itself, here's that Kolob Canyon, which was added in 56. Here's the West Temple area in here. And then here is the main activity in the canyon, right, of the Zion. This is where an 80 to probably 85% of those 5 million people a year go into this area right here. This is probably the least visited, although there is one extremely popular trail there called the Subway. And then there's some beautiful canyons and arches up in Kolob area. As far as this area here, you can see these little bus stops. This is something I'll talk about very quickly here, and that is the shuttle service. As you come in from St. George, you come in Route State 9, you come into the town of Springdale. Literally, Zion is attached to Springdale. There's no difference between them. If you have your private car, you can come through the main part of the lower section of Zion. And then if you wanted to go into the high country or you wanted to go over to Bryce Canyon, you would go this area of switchbacks, gaining more elevation up even higher into the high country, which is 7,000 and 8,000 foot high, through this mile-long tunnel. And when you exit the tunnel, you are literally in the high country. You know me, I just did a presentation Wednesday about some of the animals. This is where you will see, primarily where you will see the bighorn sheep. And hiking, as we saw there with Joe's website, you can get very detailed information on these hikes, but you can see most of the hikes. Got a couple up in the Kolob area. You got the Subway here, which was a very popular site. This is a very primitive trail. You're down actually walking, you're doing boulder hopping between the stream and out of the stream to get around some area. And then look at all the hiking areas you have here as well as up in the high country.
I just recently saw in the news that a woman died and her husband had to be rescued out of there. They died from hypothermia.
Yeah, and there was 2 kids in the car too, I think.
I didn't hear that, but
Okay. Out of all the
RV campsite.
Oh, my God, look at that road.
of all of the trails, this is the trail to Angel's Landing. It is by far the most popular, and you do now have to make a reservation to get on it. As you hike along the river down here, you get into what this area is called Walter's Wiggles, and it leads up about halfway to the elevation to where you're going to end up to Walter's Landing. And that, as you can see, this was put in the 30s by the Conservation Corps. This is not an easy trail. Your legs are going to be talking to you, and then you haven't finished. Here's the end of Angel's Landing. We've got this gentleman here. You can see that you're right on the precipice of this ridgeline. You've traveled 4.5 miles to get up here. You've gained 2,000 foot. These are okay. There are only 1 or 2 people in the picture, but if you get thousands of people up on that trail a day, you've got people going up and going down, and you're going to have to figure out a way to how to get yourself over to the edge and let somebody come by you. I point out this area here. This is called Big Bend. We are this is almost the last stop for the shuttle. And then up here at the end, when we get to the temple of the Sinanava, we're at the end of it. But this area right here is where some very narrow, steep canyons are. This is where you'll see the California condor I pointed out last time.
Mhm.
Now, this
Were
is
those
that,
pictures from you, Doug?
these are not my pictures. I do not have the knees or the legs or the stamina to
I
get
was
up
gonna,
this.
I was gonna compliment you on.
Uh,
Do they have
this is that-
defibrillator stations?
Pardon me?
Do they have defibrillator stations on the way?
No, barely have bathrooms up there. This is Big Bend here. This is called the organ. You can tell because it's almost like the stem of the exhaust pipes or whatever of the organ. But here's Angel's Landing. You can actually see people walking up there from down here.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, people do fall off of that, probably a couple a year,
Wow.
and it's straight down 2,000 foot.
Ouch.
Now, in this particular section where the Big Bend is, this is where the condors hang out. Their nest is literally just around the corner here to the right. But mountain climbing or rock climbing is one of the things you can do there. And this was literally right behind me where I'm standing, taking this picture to the south. This gentleman spent the night there. This is his bed. And he's breaking down his campsite from the night.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. I toss and turn too much at night. I would not end up staying in there very long. But that's also where the condors are. You can see the condors in this area as well. Now here's the shuttle. Again, I'm going to say the shuttle is your friend. This is the only way you can get in and out of the canyon from March through the end of November. What's nice about it is you have typically the bus driver who's giving a narration of what you could see along the way. Sometimes he will see something off the bus, off the road, and he will stop and kind of point out. Last trip when we were there just a couple weeks ago, when those bighorn sheep had come down off the hills and were down in the valley area, he would stop the bus or stop the shuttle and point out the bighorn sheep or the deer along the way. He'd also stops the bus and points out the rock climbers if you want to get a chance to see the rock climbers.
Mhm.
Now, again, I bring up the shuttle
Mhm.
stops. You start down here at the visitor center. This is kind of the flats area where you see Watchman Peak. Here's the switchbacks going out into the high country. But you've got the Natural History Museum. Here at the Canyon Junction, there is a gate there now. This is the first year we ran into the gate, and it is locked. It's a keyboard. You got to have a keyboard pass to get in. So you have to stay in your car down here, or if you're going to go east, you can take your car that way. But if you're going to go here, you're on the shuttle. You can see some of the shuttle stops have bathrooms. Almost all of them have water. And some of them actually have picnic grounds. At this point, you're at the turnaround point. About every 10 to 15 minutes, there's a shuttle going up the canyon or down, so you don't have to wait very long. Down here in this section, this is the shuttle that's actually in the town of Springdale. So you can get out of your motel, hop on the shuttle. The shuttle will bring you to the visitor center. You get on the shuttle at the visitor center and go do the canyon. When you finish, you get out of there, come down to the visitor center, hop on the shuttle, and you can either go to a restaurant or you can go to your motel room. So it is your friend. It is very convenient to have. There is only one downfall, I think, and that is whatever gear you're taking for the day, whether it's camera gear, whether it's your tripod or whatever, you got to carry it with you on the shuttle. Here's the famous visitor center. Here's that Watchman Peak in the background again. When you're on the flatlands, that is probably the most predominant geographic element in the area. This thing is photographed in many different ways. The parking area is between here and the building back here on this south side, excuse me. Over here to the west, you have the water fountains, both the water fountains for drinking, but you also have faucets for filling your water bottles or your canteens or whatever. If you are going to take one of the backcountry trails to do one of the backpack campsites, this is where you would go in to get your permit. You can see by the reflection of the door, this is the tram stop. So it's only just not even 50, 100 feet away from the visitor center itself. Here's that Watchman Peak. Now, this is highly sought after for sunset pictures.
Hmm.
So this would be probably about 4 o'clock, just before the sun got too lower. As this takes the full blunt of the sunset coming in from the west, this turns from orange to almost amber, and this just has the glow of the fall color coming through it. I tend to be more of a morning person. I love sunsets, don't get me wrong, but I like to get up very early and watch the sun come in and just start to touch the peaks.
Nice pictures.
And I'll
Mhm.
get up, stay up whenever a storm happens. And as the storm sort of slows down and the clouds begin to burn off, you can see in this case, we had a little light dusting of snow that morning. This was actually right as you're facing directly west from the Natural History Museum. This is called the Courtyard of the Patriarchs. They have named almost every one of these peaks, but this is the Virgin River. You are just still on the flatty area of the canyon of the national park itself. This is one of those primitive trails. It goes across the river. But I took this picture. This actually ended up on a calendar from the Virgin River Project. I submitted it. And over 3 years, I had like 5 pictures accepted.
Wonderful.
But this is kind of in the summer. This was, I think, our first trip, and this would be September. But this is also right here. Here's that bridge. I went down about 150 feet, got down at the riverside. Here we have depth of field, aperture priority. Here we have shutter speed priority. Slowed it down. This is about a 1 second exposure. This happened to be an extremely cold morning. As the closest I ever got to getting frostbite.
How cold is cold, Doug?
It started at 10 when I was here.
Ooh,
Ouch.
wow, that's
You
cold.
know about the restaurants that put these kind of misters outside to kind of take the warmth off? Even though it was 10 degrees, because of that water misting and stirring out of there, it seemed like it was even more lower. You can see a little bit of frost here on the tree bark. Same area. This is one of those primitive trails. Takes you back to a campground, one of those wilderness campgrounds back up in this area. There's a saying that I like to use that I've heard and said many times, and that is light illuminates and shadows define. This is one of the situations as you get into the canyon where you have highlighted areas and you'll have areas in deep shade. Very convenient place to start using your graduated neutral density filter, where you can kind of take the very brightest area and bring them down, leaving the shadow area to come through more easily. Again, this was that September trip. This is typically what you will see for your trails, for the more popular trails. They're paved. These were all again put in the 30s by the Conservation Corps. Obviously good shoes, some type of hiking poles are handy to have. And this is Linda, our friend who went with us from Phoenix. She's using a hydration pack, even though there's a lot of places along the way to get water. If you're in an area where there's not and you stay very much time, having extra water with you is going to be handy.
So what
Yes,
is
of
your
course.
preferred month to go?
My
Your-
preferred month?
Yeah.
November, every time.
Okay.
We have been, this is our 10th year. We just went this year.
Uh-huh.
We went 9 consecutive years. We skipped 20 and 21. September, we went in 2012. That was the first time we went there. Later that year in November, we came back, and we've been back every November since, except
November.
21 and 22.
Okay.
I guess you like the place.
Yeah, we do. And as I might get philosophical as we get further into this, but as to why we like it. This is the Zion Lodge. It's the only lodging you will find in the canyon. That's both, or all three, Colobe and the West Valley event, West Temple, as well as the canyon itself. This is also the only place in the park that you will find a food source of any type. Over here on the left is the little snack bar that during the busy time of the year, snack bars open. Typically you get into October, November when it cools off. They're not doing their hamburgers and whatnot out there. They're doing hot chocolate and hot tea and coffee to keep you warm. The lodging part of it is over here off camera right. This big tree, this beautiful meadow in front, or grassy area in front. Quite often in the evening and in the early morning hours, you'll see turkey and you'll see deer just grazing on the grass, having a good time.
Where do you stay, Doug?
This is the first year that we actually stayed in the lodge,
Mhm.
our first visit there. Typically, just literally outside the gate is a motel called the Cable Mountain Lodge.
Mhm.
And that's where we've stayed in all of the other times that we went there.
Yeah.
Here you see the gift shop. You got the main entrance here. You've got the main restaurant up here. And again, way off camera where the lodging itself is. This is the lobby. After we've hiked around all day, and we were averaging between 5 and 7 miles a day while we were up there for the 5 days, we would come back off the hikes, pick out one of these rocking chairs and just sit back on the rocking chairs for a couple hours, watching the turkey and the deer come up by.
Is it hard to get reservations?
Year in advance.
Okay.
Wow.
So have you made your reservations for next year?
No, we're actually debating that. They don't, you
Okay.
can't take reservations for 23 reservations are going on. They started in January.
Okay.
So we did have a reservation for January, but I'll go into that story sometime about driving in the snow.
Okay.
That's what our hope was, to find snow up there, but we changed that. Again, light illuminates shadows, define wide angle lens, lots of depth of field. This peak, or whatever you want to, it's called the pulpit. I'm actually on there's a trail. I'm on the other side of the river. The river's right off the camera here at the bottom. I'm shooting across the river to this area. This is, probably a mile from the last tram stop. It's between Big Bend and the temple. This is a very predominant spot that you'll see along there. Again, wide angle. Just take the zoom from the 24 that I shot it at, come down to 100 millimeter, go vertical rather than landscape, and you see a little different perspective. Wide angle, telephoto. This shot is actually from the back side of it, the other side of it, literally at the tram stop. This is some of the color of the rocks. Again, we're at the last tram stop. This is the darker areas, or the blacker areas, something growing up in Arizona I came to know, and that is desert varnish. The older the rocks are, particularly in the sun, they start to get a sheen to them and a darker color, and then they call it a varnish. An area like here where it gets more sun, or excuse me, less sun, it doesn't form as quickly. Same thing here. This area here was probably, in who knows how long back, a landslide. This area broke off. It probably was dark, but there's all kinds of these little pinnacles and things like that, which I find very, very rewarding to shoot. Again, you're playing with the light. You're picking up the lights in the dark. You're picking up maybe a little bit of color with the foliage. To me, this is landscape photography at its fullest.
You mentioned neutral density filter. What number of neutral density do you have?
Well, okay, in this particular case, there would not be, but this would be a primary for the neutral density. Again, I was talking about where you get into area where there's deep shadow, and then all of a sudden you'll have highlights as the light careens through a canyon. In this particular case, I would take a neutral density filter, which would darken this area. I'd kind of rotate it to where it came across here. It would bring down the highlights, but leave the shadows alone. This would probably be about a one-stop difference.
Okay.
Or you could, what they call expose for the highlights, where you go ahead and set your exposure for the brightest part, leaving the shadow area go darker. You can always bring up the shadow detail with the sliders in Lightroom or whatever program you're using, but the highlights are always harder to bring back down if you burn out a subject, whereas the shadow area is a little easier to bring back up. There might end up areas like in here where there's just simply no detail in the blacks, but at least you pick up the middles. Again, I'm talking aperture priority, going from the very closest area to the very far back area. We got the Virgin River here, kind of a leading line taking us right over here, as well as the bright area leading our eye. You can do the same thing in the portrait mode in shutter speed priority, where we slow the shutter speed down. We go ahead and blur the water, get some more predominant white caps, which bring our eye right down in here into the color.
Do you use a tripod, Doug?
Most of the time, if I get below a quarter of a second, my new camera is better at it than my older cameras have been. But yeah, if I'm in an eighth of a second, I might have to take 3 or 4 pictures at a time to get one that is the sharpest. But most of the
So
time,
you give a burst?
yeah, I'll do a burst, exactly.
Uh,
Now, this next image went from a wide angle lens. This happens to be on a vertical, obviously. We come into a horizontal, almost square format when I cropped it down. Telephoto lens. This was actually about 175 millimeter on my 200, 70 to 200 zoom. These little waterfalls are only about 18 inches tall. So that telephoto brings it out, gives it a little different perspective. This was actually a 1 second exposure to blur not only the water falling, if you will, but also puddling or pooling down here at the bottom. I talked about the tunnel getting up into the high country. This tunnel is 1.1 miles long.
Wow.
You'll notice that we have a ranger here with a stop sign and a car stop. Generally, it's 2 lanes wide, one up, one down. If you have a extra wide vehicle like an RV or a motor coach, they will stop traffic, let you come through the tunnel by yourself with leading the cars behind you. And then when you're through it, then we'll go ahead and let the traffic back down again. I believe it costs you $15 for that.
Right, extra.
Once you come out of this tunnel, you're in high country. You're obviously at this point very prone to seeing bighorn sheep. We have literally seen bighorn sheep right here outside the tunnel. Here we go into the high country. This is about an 8-panel pano. We've got the main canyon back over here on this side, down in that 3 and 4 foot, 4,000 foot elevation. Here we're probably close to 7,000 in this flatter area, and then the peaks are touching 8,000. This is what I, growing up in Arizona, note as a wash. We always throw the adjective out there that it's a dry wash, and most of the time they're dry wash. This is Clear Creek. It actually has a creek name. It literally goes all the way as where the road goes. You can see the road coming through here and it curves around over here. You see an edge marker. This creek will go out at least 15 miles actually from here, you're about 8 miles from the eastern entrance. But again, you're in solid rock. A few areas where there might be a little gathering of what I'm loosely call topsoil, but for the most part, it's all rock. So when the rain does hit, there's no areas for it to soak into. So it just simply trickles right off, forms with other water draining off, and this becomes a raging torrent, no longer a dry wash. It's a wet river. Here we see the water. This actually, we were there from the start almost to the end of this water formation. Started raining. This creek is down here below. We were up shooting bighorn. It started to rain, and in about 15 to 20 minutes, all of a sudden, this little waterfall shows up. And it drained in here, and the creek, which was dry, eventually had about 2 inches of water flowing through it. And this was only about an hour-long shower. I bring your attention to an area here, but also right down here. You see how the water is wide here and it's kind of narrowed down? And then here it's really narrowed. This is true water erosion going on in the sandstone. And this is slowly but surely creating a depression in the sandstone. A few million years from now, this continues. That'll be a side canyon, probably 100 yards deep from front to back. This is literally Mother Nature carving a new canyon.
It's gorgeous.
Up in high country again, we had a little dusting of snow on our trip. This is showing you here, we've got some pretty tall pine trees. But again, we've got solid rock. We have an area here where some of the sand, which washes off with the rain and the wind, has gathered, and you've got some vegetation in the cracks a little bit where we have some food for them to grow. Look what's happening to the root of the pine tree. There's the root of the pine tree trying to find moisture and food.
Wow.
Moisture and food. Same thing up here. So many of the roots on these taller trees are literally on top of the sandstone. Here you see much of the Southwest, and that's Arizona, Utah, Nevada, was a large sea millions of years ago. And as those seas took on debris washing into it, it laid down the dirt in layers at the bottom of the lake or the sea. And over years, millions of years, it got compressed down and it turned to sandstone. And that's what these layers are. These are literally years worth of deposits coming from the sand. Geologists can actually read these and kind of say, like in this area right here, see how much thicker it is as opposed to these lines? Here's another area. This would be a time of a very extreme drought where there wasn't a lot of deposits being put in the lake or the sea. And then these would be quick succession. Again, all sandstone, all solid rock. And you can see that there's only very few places that the greenery will grow. Here we have more of that desert varnish. Here's another one of those weeping areas where the water coming off, there's some snow up here as it drains down. There's probably a little depression there. And when it fills up, it just trickles down over the edge. Beautiful colors. Again, this is why I like going there, the beautiful contrast of the colors, and got a little fall color in it. Here we have rose. Again, you can see some of the sandstone has eroded away and kind of formed the area below this cliff. And this is a pathway to a photography gallery. The ancient ones, again, those first visitors in 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, put their pictures on the wall, petroglyphs. These particular ones are rated to be about 3,000 years old, still shown today. This is this artist's renditions of bighorn sheep. Here you see the desert varnish, and he just plucked his way through it with some type of hammer and device and put in these bighorn sheep. Quick note on bighorn sheep. We saw that the Europeans, the Mormons, kind of entered this area in the middle 1800s. By the mid 1950s, almost all of the bighorn sheep that went back this many years were hunted out. They literally, the bighorn sheep that you see today are offspring of transplant from other parts of Utah back into the canyon, back into these Zion. They maintain the herd now at about 400 to 600 animals. If they get many over that, they will actually catch some of them and transfer them to other parts of the country. Here we have, I believe this might have been street photography going on. We got a gentleman running here, or character running here. We've got somebody walking, looking maybe back at the photographer. Here we have some things going on that we're not really sure of. We think this might be a snake. Have no idea what this is. This appears to be maybe females with their babies in their carriers. This is maybe another snake here. This, as
They're doing
I
the
see
Macarena,
this,
aren't they?
huh?
They're doing the Macarena.
There you go. As I see this, this is a gentleman or person throwing something at this person running away. Now, obviously, various tribes did fight with other tribes, so this could be depicting that. But again, no way of knowing. And they also have some important things religious to them or important to them in one way or another. They duplicated it over here. But you can see here, I'm down at the very edge where the grass is, or the edge of the. All right, wrapping things up. Some recommended gear. Obviously, the best camera to use is the camera you have with you. Having said that, I will say that you will probably enjoy taking pictures if you have wide angle lens and if you have a camera that can either zoom to a telephoto or if you have changeable lenses. Filters, a neutral density filter that allows you to slow down the shutter speed, but it also in those canyon areas where there's highlights and deep shadow, either doing it by exposing for the highlight or putting that neutral density where the filter itself is blocking some of the light coming in the highlight. And then a tripod, use that for your longer exposures to blur the water. And then if you're going to set up for a sunset, but just remember, you will need to carry it on the shuttle if you're going to be up in the canyon. Personal gear, a hat. It's going to be hot in the summer and it's going to be cold in the winter. Plenty of water. And again, you do have areas inside the canyon itself, in the scenic canyon, where there is water available to you, not only to drink as a fountain, but also to refill your water containers. I call this nibbling food. There is only that one area at the lodge to get food. I like a product called, oh, come on, Doug, get your brain working. Cliff bars, CLEF bars, different flavors, but it's one of the few foods that you can put in your pocket and it doesn't end up in a melted puddle in your wrapper when you go to eat it. Cliff bars. Trail reservations. This is again becoming more and more prevalent in our national parks. Recreation.gov is your go-to place to do that. Here in California, if we were to go up to Yosemite, Yosemite does require a reservation even to get into the park now. A good map. I always like the National Geographic maps for a couple of reasons. One, very detailed. They've got the hiking trails marked. They've got a lot of information on it, but the pages are not generally basic paper. It is a coated paper that you can fold and unfold it many times, and it won't fall apart on you.
Mm.
If you're here in the fall and the winter, like we were this summer, or excuse me, just November, the high we saw in the 5 days we were there was 42.
Mm.
The low we saw was 18 at night. Now, I should probably have put this one first. Rose and I always have whistles on our clothing when we're out walking and hiking in this area. We do it for our own personal safety. When Rose and I head on out, I just get into a zone and I'll just grab my camera and I'll just start walking. Rose doesn't have the same enthusiasm sometimes that I have, so she might stay a little closer to the car, but I could end up a mile or two or more away from her. If for something I got klutzy and fell down and twisted an ankle or maybe broke a leg, you have the good old 3 shorts, 3 longs, and 3 shorts for the typical SOS. I probably would have put that first. We have also added over the years a 2-way radio or walkie-talkies where she'll keep one with her and I'll keep one with mine. And if for some reason I have to get a hold of her, the walkie-talkies will allow us to do that. All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Very good, Doug. I like that.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions, Doug.
Go for it.
When you're in that really cold morning that you said was 10 degrees, so how does that affect your exposures and what do you do to protect your camera gear?
Good question. The biggest thing you're going to experience is your battery life will go extremely short.
Hmm.
The new camera I bought, a mirrorless camera.
Mhm.
The first 2 trips Rose and I went with it, I was able to get over 1,000 exposures before the battery went dead.
Okay.
That was up in the central California coast. When we hit Zion, I was lucky to get 450. What you do there is you bring an extra battery or 2, keep them in your pocket
Mhm.
so that when they get drained out, you just pop the one out, put the new one in and go.
Mhm.
As far as the exposure values and things, generally your camera will function normally. But again, this is one of those times when you want to have gloves on.
Mhm.
And they do make gloves that have your fingertips, at least your index fingertips, exposed to where you can still control the shutter speed or the shutter
Mhm.
release. And maybe if you've got a touchscreen back screen, some gloves will block that.
Mhm.
So there are gloves that are designed just for photography. Does that answer your question?
Yes, except one more thing. Do you ever have problems with condensation inside your lens?
Good point. When we did this during our, I guess it was fall color photography,
Mhm.
landscape photography we did for the fall color.
Mhm.
And I mentioned that as you have your camera in your car and it's a cold morning like that, and your car is warm, you may have the heater on. When you first get out of the car or your vehicle, let your camera warm up a little bit or actually cool off
Cool off. Yeah.
from the warm inside to the cold outside so that you don't steam up the lens
Mhm.
kind of the same way your eyeglasses do if you wear eyeglasses when you step out into there.
Mhm.
The more moist the environment is or the air is, the more predominant that's going to be a problem. It's more a condensation on the outside of the lens rather than inside.
Okay.
But you just let it warm or cool off to the outside, equalize to the outside
Equalize the temperature. Okay, good point. And one last question is, where do you find your National Geographic maps?
Anywhere.
Okay,
REI,
all right.
Amazon.
Okay.
They actually they have literally the entire United States, and they break it off into segments for these maps.
Okay, I'll look for those. That's great. A really great tip.
Yeah, let me.
And the
see.
whistle. I love the whistle tip. I've been an open water swimmer and I've been out on foggy mornings with my swim partner and we had whistles and actually had to use them a couple times out in the water to find each other.
Okay, Doug,
Let me hang on just a second.
can I say something? Oh,
Can you let me get back to stop sharing.
Okay. One thing I think everyone should add to their
Oh.
list if they're going on a,
Okay, great. Thanks, Doug. Thanks. Go
Okay.
ahead, Steve.
if you're going someplace like Doug just went or anywhere similar to that, I recommend that you get this self-adherent tape. It's usually brown. It's tape that sticks to itself. And I say that based on almost 20 years of mountain bike patrol in Chino Hills State Park. There's hardly an injury you can get that it will solve, that will help you temporarily provide you relief and protection to get you somewhere where you can get real medical attention. It even scrapes, it'll cover them and protect them. It's a very strong tape. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? They use, when you draw blood, they'll wrap your.
Oh, yeah, that's flexible too. Yeah.
Right.
Duct tape,
No,
No,
no.
this isn't duct tape.
red,
It's
green
an
tape.
expandable fabric that tightens up.
No,
It sticks to you, but it's like an ace bandage, but it is now sticky.
yeah.
Okay, I don't know what it's called, but it's like that.
I also keep moleskin in my camera bag.
Oh,
If you wear a blister in your
Yeah.
shoes if you're out walking.
Nothing worse, man. Yeah.
I use that flexible tape fishing. I put it on my thumb. So when I'm controlling the line going off or coming back on, it doesn't burn the skin off my
That's
thumb.
a good idea. That's just a really good thing to have in the car, just to have with you. That
Yeah,
whistle.
I went and bought a whole lot of it about 5 years ago, and I found out the shelf life on the tape part, the sticky part, expires, and it doesn't last very long.
Okay. What a nice presentation, Doug.
Yes,
Your
Doug.
images are beautiful, of
Oh my
course.
gosh.
No one's surprised about that anymore. And I like all your tips of how the tram works and the hotel up there.